Coming up, an animation features the beauty of Indigenous cultures. Plus, an Alaskan museum gets ready for tourism. And from shifting game patterns to moving fishing spots, we dive into how climate change is impacting food sources for Native communities. Those interviews, plus headlines, on the ICT Newscast.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.
Support for the ICT Newscast with Aaliyah Chavez comes from the Arizona PBS studios in Phoenix at the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism and Mass Communications at Arizona State University.
Thank you for joining us. I am Aaliyah Chavez. We start today in Washington, D.C., where a longtime member of Congress who is Native American has secured one of the most influential roles on Capitol Hill. Chickasaw citizen and Oklahoma Representative Tom Cole is the new chairman of the House Appropriations Committee. After getting the backing of House Republicans last week, Cole will now lead the group of lawmakers that is responsible for setting aside money for almost all of the functions of the federal government. The 10-term, 74-year-old lawmaker said in a statement that he is excited to hit the ground running. Cole is set to remain the co-chair of the Congressional Native American Caucus and has been described by his colleagues as one of the few Republicans that Democrats say they enjoy working with, according to Politico. Staying in Washington, a leader who advanced solutions to sacred site protection and the MMIP crisis has retired, leaving behind a long legacy in the Department of Justice. Tracy Tulu is the outgoing director of the Office of Tribal Justice, which he oversaw for over 20 years. Attorney General Merrick Garland weighed in, saying Tulu built the office from an idea into an institution within the DOJ. As a descendant of the Confederated Tribes of the Colville Reservation, Tulu was a leader in several landmark pieces of legislation, including the Not Invisible Act and Savannah's Act, as well as the Safeguarding Objects of Tribal Patrimony Act and others. In South Dakota, a Native American nonprofit has purchased land in the Black Hills near a sacred site. Officials from the Cheyenne River Youth Project announced it bought 40 acres adjacent to Bear Butte State Park in the western part of the state. The purchase, it says, is in support of a growing movement to return land to Indigenous people. It is not clear how much the organization paid, but that the move hopes to reconnect Native nations to their deep roots in the region. Well, longtime and outgoing president of the Alaska Federation of Natives, Julie Kitka, has been nominated to be the new co-chair of the Denali Commission. She was backed last week by Alaska's congressional delegation for the job, which oversees a variety of federal programs in Alaska. Republican Senator Lisa Murkowski said in a statement, "There is no one more qualified to advocate for economic development in rural Alaska than Kitka." Kitka's nomination will need to be considered by the U.S. Department of Commerce, and if approved, she would replace Jocelyn Fenton, who is the interim federal co-chair. We end our headlines today in Arizona, where ICT's Brandolyn Clark reports on a campus event at Arizona State University that is uplifting Native women.
Alpha Pi Omega hosted its annual matriarch panel as part of ASU's Indigenous Cultures Week. This event, held by the All-Indigenous sorority, spotlights women's achievements and professional paths and aims to empower the university's Native students. I spoke to Seneca Nation citizen Kehala George.
Today we're having the Indigenous Matriarchs panel, which just kind of highlights sisters we have that are alumni and have continued their education or their career, and just showcase like Indigenous women in those professions. Just being an Indigenous woman on campus is hard because for a lot of us, we're the first in our family to pursue a higher education or be accepted into these institutions. So we really represent like a large group of people. So that can be very stressful and hard. So we kind of support each other and uplift each other through those challenges.
Reporting in Tempe, Arizona, Brandolyn Clark, ICT News.
We are back with ICT's Mark Trahant, who recently spoke with Assistant Secretary of Indian Affairs Brian Newland about the agency's focus on climate change. Mark, welcome back. This is such a broad subject.
Hello, Aaliyah, and that's exactly right. And if you look at the agency's budget, they're seeking $120 million to fund 146 projects in tribal communities. When I sat down with Secretary Newland, I wanted to know more about what's ahead for Indigenous communities, especially when we think about the impact of climate change on food. We know game patterns are changing, fishing areas are moving, and what is the process for working together to adapt? One of the impacts we know that's going to occur is what it's going to do to traditional food. Again, Alaska might be in place to take an advantage of that, where game patterns are changing, fishing areas are changing. How do we manage and work together on that sort of thing?
Well, I mentioned earlier that we have to have a yes-and approach. So we have to prepare for the impacts of climate change, but we've also got to continue to make investments in slowing and stopping climate change from advancing. And so we've seen that with the Inflation Reduction Act, the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law. This is really a global effort that the president and his administration, Secretary Holland, are helping to lead. But when we look at things like ecosystems that support traditional foods, up in Alaska, we have an initiative called the Gravel to Gravel Initiative that we are working with Alaska Native communities and other communities in Alaska to restore salmon and protect their habitat. We're doing that in other places through things like dam removal, investments in fish hatcheries, and all sorts of things to protect traditional foods. And not just fish, lots of other places around the country where we are supporting ecosystem restoration with an eye toward protecting those traditional food sources as we deal with climate change.
And in all of these things, sometimes there's a plus sign on the ledger because there may be new, for example, growing opportunities that don't exist now.
Yeah, the thing about this whole effort is we want to make sure tribes are leading this, and that it's not the BIA of old, where we're coming in and saying we've got all the answers for you, and we'll show you how it's done. It's really about us making these investments in tribes and Indian people, providing support, and then making sure that they're leading these efforts on decisions about whether to rethink about what's a traditional food and how to grow it and how to use it. We don't want to be making those decisions for Indian people from here in the federal government.
I want to close by asking about young people, and it's really easy to be dark about climate change, but on the other hand, if you're a young person, your career is set if you have any interest in any of these areas.
Well, I think I love talking about the opportunities for young people and really the opportunities for our country when we engage with young people and get them involved. The president hosted a tribal youth summit last fall, and I had the opportunity to attend that and sit at the table with some young leaders from across Indian country. And I was really impressed. And in fact, I told one of the groups I was talking with that if I were put in a position of competing with them for jobs and opportunities out of college, I never would have measured up, because a lot of young people from across Indian country, they are pushing doors open that Indian people haven't had open for a long time, and they're so talented, and they're not accepting the status quo or the old way of doing things. And that's the other thing that makes me really hopeful. We are trying really hard to make sure that we bring young folks into government through internships or hiring here to bring that new way of thinking into our work. And for me as a leader now, I view it as part of my responsibility to help open those pathways for folks. But I'm just really impressed by the talent that's out there across Indian country in terms of young people, and excited to see what it's going to do for all of us.
Animation brings magic to life, and that's the case with our next story. We Carry You With Us celebrates culture and community. ICT's Ashley Sinclair has more on the short film created by the Urban Indian Health Institute.
The animated film We Carry You With Us, directed by Abigail Echohawk with art by Sage Romero, is an act of Indigenous resistance. Echohawk said that the film strives to break stereotypes and show the beauty of Indigenous culture.
I created this story really thinking about the stories that have been told to me across the nation from different tribes, and wanted to represent that Indigenous people gathered information, whether it be in our beadwork, whether it be in the way that we cultivated the science around us for our traditional medicines. We gathered it, we had people who protected it, and there were times when we came together as tribes and we shared information for the good and well-being of our community. And so that was the entire purpose of this animation, was to show the beauty of who we are and quit letting other people determine what our story is. We were always data gatherers. And so I'm really trying to shift this idea that we never were, and instead say, this is our opportunity to reclaim who we are, and to say data is ours and should be governed by us, and that we are the ones who are going to ensure its use for the good and well-being of our people.
It took Sage Romero 5 months to make sure that every scene held importance. Romero said that the flowers for the Inuit tribe took the most time to draw.
I wanted to make sure the flowers are right. And there were some changes that I had to make to the Inuit character, where I had to change the hood. And, it's not like film where something that needs to be changed, maybe the producer doesn't like this or the director wants this changed. With film, you can just go back and you shoot it. Whereas this, you have to go back and erase every single frame that has to be done, and, and then draw it back in the way it should be. So that frame where she's walking in front of the flowers, I think that was that, because I had to change her entire hood and the stylization of it, and then I had to adjust everything to where those flowers were done. And even, you might not see it because it's so quick, but when the Awanichi part is, you see all the images of the people standing in the background. I drew every single one of those persons that are in there. And it just takes a lot of time, and then you plug it in, and then it's in there for like 5 seconds. It's kind of fun, to know you put so much effort in it, but at the same time, it's just like bam. But if you really look at it when it's happening, then it's like, oh, maybe when people rewatch it, then they could really look into it and say, oh, there's those, I didn't see those before.
From the mesmerizing visuals to the creative storytelling, animation continues to push the boundaries of storytelling in ways that captivate audiences of all ages. You can watch the video on the Urban Indian Health Institute's website and YouTube channel. Ashley Sinclair, ICT News.
We are all children born of water. It is where all life begins. Water embraces and protects us. We revere it in our homes. We need to live close to water. It nourishes and cleanses us. All living things know this. Sometimes water is gentle and floats in the air. Sometimes water is harsh and powerful. Sometimes it catches the sun's rays. Water changes with the seasons, alive and always moving, even when no one is looking. Water is patient. Water endures. Water brings clarity. Water purifies our thoughts. Water brings us together. Water is holy. Water helps us heal. Water is medicine.
It is a destination tourism spot on an island, and the Aluktik Museum and Archaeological Repository in Kodiak, Alaska wants you to stop by. It recently received a grant from the American Indian Alaska Native Tourism Association, or IENTA, in partnership with the U.S. Forest Service. April Counselor told ICT producer Shirley Snavy all about the project.
This project is going to help us design a new exhibit in our gallery, as well as a couple of other things, including a statewide ad campaign for our museum and also a competition for artists for an outdoor mural. Our current building looks a little bit like an office building. It doesn't have a strong cultural presence, and so I'm excited to bring the incredible culture that we have inside our walls to an outside wall so that people out on the street can see our building and know, oh, that's the Aluktik Museum. I want to go visit.
Tell us a little bit more about the museum.
The Aluktik Museum opened in 1995, and so we're in our 29th year. We're hoping to reopen to the public in our 30th year for our grand reopening because we're currently under renovation. So this IENTA project is actually part of the new exhibits that we are creating as part of that renovation to expand the public spaces in our building and better serve the community through more exhibits, but also workshop spaces and just more to offer to the community.
Talk a little bit about tourism in Kodiak.
Well, Kodiak is a little bit off the beaten path here in Alaska. We're not in the southeast region when people often think of cruise ships and that sort of thing. We do actually get cruise ships here, a lot fewer than you might see in like Juneau or Ketchikan, but the number is increasing. And I think that nowadays there's more and more adventure tourists, people who do tourism to see the natural environment. And of course, we have a beautiful natural environment here. And then also cultural tourism is increasing. And so before the pandemic, we had slow increases to the number of visitors we had each year. And now that the pandemic is quieting down, we're seeing increased numbers of cruise ships, as well as increased numbers of independent travelers. And so we're hoping to capture the attention of some of these people who may not have wanted to come to Alaska in the past, but are now seeing it as a great place to visit. So we're hoping that this tourism grant will help get the word out about what we have to offer. And for those people who are already coming to Kodiak, we want our museum to be one of those not to miss places, because we really have, in my opinion, the best understanding and the best way of educating about our Native people.
Alaska's pretty big, and there's a lot of different kinds of tribes and different languages spoken. What stands out for you, or what would you want the visitor to know about the Aluktik?
The Aluktik people on Kodiak Island and also on the coast of Alaska are linguistically related to the Central Yupik language, and so that's one of our cousins. We're a little bit more distantly related to the Unangan people, which some people call Aleut. Actually, some people also used to call us Aleut. So there's a lot of confusion about the name for our Native people. And currently, Aluktik and the word Sugpiaq are the two primary names that our people go by. I personally use Aluktik, and my dad uses Sugpiaq. So there's no rhyme or reason. It's really based on preference. And so we try to make sure that everyone honors what each other is using as a name for our people. But we don't have a lot of people. On Kodiak Island, there's less than 4,000 Aluktik people, and our communities are spread across an area the size of Connecticut, but we're all on an island that no one's connected by roads. And so it's a much different lifestyle than many people may be familiar with. But it's incredibly beautiful here, and our culture is really formed by the environment that we find ourselves in here in the the stormy Gulf of Alaska.
I also was taking a look at your website. Archives seem to be personally very important to you.
Yes, archives are definitely important, and it's something that we try to connect people with here at the museum. We're called the Alutiiq Museum and Archaeological Repository, sometimes just the Alutiiq Museum, but some people think of a museum as only having one thing to offer, and that is exhibits. Well, we do have exhibits at our museum, but we have so many more additional programs to help support the culture in the community, living culture workshops. We just recently started doing some workshops to teach the regalia, the snow falling parka pattern, but in a modern style out of velvet. We've been doing workshops on the beaded regalia, the headdresses and the beaded cuffs and that sort of thing. And we've also done a lot of workshops on mask carving and basket weaving, just all of those cultural skills that over time became more difficult to pass down in the Native community. We're trying to help reconnect with those and bring them back into a living context.
Are you seeing a lot of interest in young people in learning about their culture?
Yes, we're seeing quite a lot of young people getting involved in either becoming an intern here at the Alutiiq Museum or participating in our workshops. And it's really exciting to see because in my youth, I didn't even really understand what being Native meant because I grew up in the village. There wasn't really anyone to compare to. But after we moved into the town of Kodiak, I realized, there's something different. I'm different than other people in my class. And at that time, sometimes people would make fun of the Native students for various reasons. I'm seeing today that students are more proud of their Native heritage. It's not something to be ashamed of. It's something to be really celebratory about. Learning our language, kids are taking Alutiiq language classes now. Sometimes they're learning on their own. Sometimes they're doing it in school. We have culture camps in the summer. So our culture is really currently in a state of revitalization, and it's an exciting time to be involved. And it's an exciting time to also learn about our people because our culture is really open in terms of wanting to share about our culture with other people in the community who are not tribal members or visitors that come from far away. And so I think that's one of the reasons that our museum feels welcoming, and we're hoping to attract more people in rather than being just inward looking and only kind of focusing on ourselves. We try to walk in both worlds in that respect.
Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day. Arave is today, tuat is good, and tavai is day. Arave tuat tavai, which is Ute for today is a good day.
In the Midwest, the snow has melted and tribes are saying hello to both the spring season and the Thunderbirds or thunderstorms, which bring much needed rains. Last weekend, the Indian Center in Lincoln, Nebraska held a community celebration called Return of the Thunderbirds. Let's watch the Many Moccasins dance troupe.
Amongst the Great Lakes area is where this dance originates from with the Ojibwe. And what is said that this dance here is a healing dance and is a medicine dance that happened in a dream. And what happened was that there was a young woman that was sick in the village, and her father had a dream one night. And what happened in that dream is that the ancestors came to him in that dream and told him to make this dress. And this dress is supposed to make beautiful noise to the ears. But also not only that, but also the new cones that is on this dress, that is of the tobacco and relations to the tobacco lids that are on there. Often people get those misinterpreted as bells, but they're jingles. And again, coming from the tin lids of snuff can lids. And people often chuckle about that, but that's also to represent the tobacco. You often will see them moving back and forth in a zigzagging pattern. That to symbolize the ups and downs in life that we have, but we always move forward in this dance.
That is a slice of our Indigenous world. For all the latest, visit us at ictnews.org. From all of us in the newsroom, stay safe, my relatives.
This program is made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people.